We are here tonight with we're going to be talking about my favorite subject, investing in women. This is my full intention. I just have to say, like, the world will be a better place when we move more money and resources to women and women of color. I am sure of that. I feel, and I also feel like that is going to have like the ripple effect on so many other things. So our intention tonight, and we know obviously if you're a member of the Battery and you're here and Women of the Battery, that you care about this too. And we appreciate all of you showing up. We know, the long Zooms for everybody can be draining. At the same time, the fact that you're showing up this evening, also to our speakers who are showing up this evening, and to some of our speakers who are in the East Coast where it's even later, thank you for your commitment to this subject that is all near and dear to our heart, investing in women. So I just want to give a super big picture here, context before we dive in. First of all, I'm thrilled that I actually personally know these three women who are all leaders in the space. Like we're just lucky to have them all. Many of you are familiar with Kristin Hall, who is a member of the Battery and Battery Powered, and she actually kicked off one of our first conversations when we used to meet in person. That was a long time ago. But right at the end of that in-person meeting, Kristin Hall and I had a conversation to kick off our Women in Money series. And so many of you were so interested in that topic and asked for more. And so here we are again, and we've broadened out the space. You know that Nia, if you are interested, I just want to give a plug in investing with your values in the public markets. Nia is the place to go to with a gender lens, with a racial justice lens. Check it out, Nia Impact. I'm super impressed, and I know many of you are too, with what Kristin Hall is up to. Tracy Gray has become like, I love Tracy. Want to just give her a big hug. Tracy and I don't know, we both said as soon as we met, we felt our energies align. And Tracy is, so Tracy runs many things, but one is We Are Enough. She is the founder of We Are Enough, which is actually, it's a nonprofit organization, which is all about actually this subject, empowering all women around their money conversations and their investments. And so check out We Are Enough. But she's also raising $100 million for the 22 fund, and she's going to tell you more about that. And Tracy is just one of my favorite human beings. That's just what I want to say too. And Kristin Hall and Barbara Clarke. Like, we have like the dream team here. Barbara Clarke is an angel investor. She is one of, she is a co-founder, she's founder of Impact Seat. But she is known in the space as being a prolific investor for years and years and years in women, and particularly centered on women of color. All of these three women are committed to moving more money towards women and women of color, and they're just coming at it from three different angles. And I think we're going to have a robust, exciting conversation tonight. And again, I just want to set an intention that everybody here, at the end of this talk, we're not just like, oh, that's nice and everything, but that we really feel inspired to actually take an action, like take a step, take a piece of, everybody has a piece of power, a piece of money, and moves it in very intentional ways towards women. And we hope to leave this conversation with some pro tips from our three speakers about some concrete steps to do that. And again, I want to say that on the one hand, even though there's like this growing interest in gender lens investing and racial and investing with a racial justice lens, on the other hand, you may have heard the news that in 2020, the year also that so many women and women of color were more negatively impacted by this pandemic, that global venture capital in women, global investments in women were down, decreased. I mean, we already just had a bone. Women of color had an even smaller bone. And now it's like, really, they just like gave us a crumb. So that is just shocking, unacceptable in 2021. I just want to say we're all over it. Doesn't matter what the statistics show about, like, actually, it's a better return on your investment. You can earn like 15% more money if you invest in companies with more diverse teams. We know all the statistics. Doesn't seem to make a difference. I am a little hopeful that I feel like there's a lot of societal shifts going on, that people are, there's an awakening happen. And I do believe that there is more interest, and in terms of women in particular, much of this interest, some of our male allies as well, but many women like you all on this call are actually saying, how can I help? What's the first step? How do I do it? And that is what, or there's many steps, show us the way. And that is what this conversation is about today. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Leti. I do want to say, if you do have some questions that come up in the conversation, put them in the chat, and we're going to try to get to that at the very end. But I'm super excited to talk to these three trailblazers in the space of women and money. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much, Kristin. You're the best cheerleader I've ever worked with. I love these sessions with you every time. To introduce myself a little bit more, I mentioned I'm Leti Light. I'm one of the co-chairs of Womenled of The Battery. Professionally, I have worked in philanthropy for the last 20 plus years, and I'm particularly interested and passionate about this topic because so much of the capital that is moved, particularly at the transformational scale that I operate in, is advanced by women. And for whatever reason, interestingly, that hasn't either been known or highlighted, but it's been true for a long time, and it's just escalating. And so tonight we have an opportunity to bring that into ourselves and activate wealth and capital in ways that are meaningful to us, for us, with each other. And I'm really excited about that. So for each of our speakers tonight, I will give you an opportunity. Kristin did an awesome job of introducing each of you, but if you'd like to say a little bit more about yourselves, we'll start there. And Tracy, I'll start with you.
Oh, I wasn't prepared to be the first. So hi, everybody. It's nice to see you and meet you. I'm Tracy Gray, the founder and managing partner of the 22 Fund and the founder of We Are Enough. Started my career as an engineer on the space shuttle program. So I always like to say, when people make it complicated to invest with diversity, I'm like, it's not rocket science. And I know rocket science. So that kind of shuts them up a bit. And I'm very passionate, as you can see. My face hurts smiling every time Kristin Hayden speaks. I love it that we are thinking the same thing, that women give a lot of money away, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the UN has said that the key to impacting the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are increasing women's wealth. And you can't do that by philanthropy. You cannot. So literally the path to changing the world is through women's wealth and our wallets. And my big passion is everyone activating their wallets. And I see Kristen Hull has put in some good facts there. One fact is that there's some research that shows that 85% of our capital, women's capital, goes to our family and communities. Men, 35%. What the hell are they doing with that, all the rest of that money? They're investing it and doing other things I don't even want to think about. But
they're buying stupid shit.
What was that?
They're buying stupid shit.
Exactly, and hiding it. So, that's my reason for being, is increasing women's wealth, especially women of color, especially Black women. We are the most educated demographic in the country, but when it comes to venture capital, we get 0.006%, literally a rounding error. And so, that's everything about me is changing that, because I'm a Buddhist who's also an engineer. And so if something's unfair, that's my Buddhist side that gets, riled up. And then if it doesn't make sense, illogical, that's my engineering side, and I want to fix it. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Tracy. Kristin Hull.
Hello, everyone. I want to just say that I'm so excited and echo what, others have said. Thank you to our co-hosts, to Kristin and to Leti for organizing this panel, for hosting it, to our other panelists. Barbara, I met, kind of close to both of the beginning of our journeys, and it's been a long time, and it's been such, we're here, and kind of, it seems like Zoom's crossing in the night to actually be on one where we get to talk together. It's going to be really fun. Tracy and I also met on a panel back in the day when these things were in person, and I want to say it was in Denver, maybe. And what was interesting about that one for me is that I really came into this concept of investing as really including people of color, because I went to elementary school growing up in Oakland, California as the white girl, and it really impacted me on who gets access to what, and at that time it was time to go to the library and get books. And I really noticed a difference that I came into school reading, and I got to go to the library and read anything I wanted. And some of the kids that sat next to me really didn't have the same access. And I was noticing this since 5, and then it started to play out in different ways about who got in trouble on the playground, who got access to the science fair. All of these different things kind of started to propel me. So by the time I got to being an activist and then an active manager, I really was thinking about racial equity. And I met Tracy, and we're on stage together, kind of echoing each other's thoughts about women. And it never really occurred to me that women, I don't know, I think I was so immersed in the water we swim in as this patriarchy that it didn't occur to me how much it was affecting our entire economy until I was in there talking to Tracy and saying, why aren't we getting meetings? Why aren't, we're both doing amazing work. What's happening out there? And it was kind of looking around. And then I came across this night study that I put in, here in the chat. And I called them. I called the foundation. I was like, what's going on here? And it turns out they had commissioned Harvard University to do this. So then I called them, but it was this white guy who did the study, and he wasn't that interested in it. It was kind of, foundation kind of threw some money at this study. I would like the people on this screen to do the next study and really call in those voices to really see not only, it turns out I found it flawed in a few ways, because it wasn't including funds like Tracys or like mine, Nia's, that aren't even listed yet on these platforms. And to get listed on these places, that's a whole nother barrier. So just really kind of opening up the system and knowing that when women and people of color direct their money, they're very quick to connect the dots and to really invest into the things they believe in. So I'm really convinced that when we have money and investment know-how in the hands of women, that our economy will straighten itself out. And actually, I won't say straighten itself out, because we need a circular economy and we need an inclusive economy. And actually, our linear economy, which is very straight, wasn't designed well. And we need to actually, really rethink this. And so I'm trusting that by empowering women investors to invest into women in solutions focused things, that we're actually going to really make the big difference. And so that's what we do at NIA. NIA means intention and purpose. And so baking our own company with intention and purpose, as far as all the best practices of inclusion, and then using that lens to engage with all of the corporations. And so we have a very concentrated portfolio, just 50 companies, because we're trying to pull people away from the index. And the index, I'll just say on this call, because we're talking about women in financial feminism, the index, was developed in the 70s, kind of popularized in the 80s. Vanguard and others took it, to make it popular. Now it's kind of the water we swim in. And why is that a problem? Because who would think, nobody on this screen would think that we should have an investment criteria, the largest companies in the US. Like, why would that be a thing? Why wouldn't we pick what is the company work on? What are the products and services? And then do they have the team to get it done? Right? And so as women, I can say size doesn't matter. We don't care. That's not a thing for us. We want to know how is the company baked? What's it doing? Where is it headed? What is its North Star? And then does it have a diverse and effective team to get that done? And so I That's how we construct our portfolio, is we look at the revenue sources, because we want to see, how is this company baked, and is it baked with its very revenue sources, products and services that matter? And then of course, does it have the practices that will lead to a positive and inclusive company culture? Because we know that, and the research tells us, that a diverse team is more effective a lot across, many criteria, one of them being innovation. And because we're investing in innovation, some of our companies have gotten to a certain place, and yet to keep that, and this is also actually a very male construct, is the castle and the moat about being separate. We actually don't want to see a moat as separate. We want to see our companies collaborating, and how well are they playing with others in the sandbox, in their community? Have they made statements about Black Lives Matter? And are they showing that within their own company and then also in their community? So really different investment criteria to build this out and move us forward.
Oh, Kristin, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction to the topic and everything that you're doing to advance women and our wealth and our power. Barbara, I will turn to you to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and what you're doing a little bit before we hop into and dig into the questions tonight.
I mean, pretty straightforward. I'm an investor. I've been investing for about 9 years in private equity, so directly into privately held companies as an angel investor, and also as a VC. I'm part of Portfolio. Many of you may have heard of that. It's a really innovative way for women to get in as investors for reasonably sized checks to get into venture funds. And I'm happy to talk more about that. And my whole thing is just to demystify processes, because we've been socialized that, oh, you little lady, this is not a place for you. This is just not where you should be participating. So I want to demystify, because I figure, like, I'm really smart. If there's stuff I'm not understanding, it's because it's sort of meant to be purposely opaque.
Mhm.
And I really want women to step into their power, because it isn't just like it has such a knock-on effect. And one of I am going to share, I have a super success fun story that we'll talk about later. But when we use our power, it has such a ripple effect. We get to choose who gets rich, because we get to choose the investors that the entrepreneurs we're investing in. We also get to choose what innovation survives and lives and gets out there in the world. And that is really important, because there are so many problems, so many complex problems, and women are at the center of them. As far as we have the great ideas, we have the solutions, we have all the experience. We are the consumers. We buy like basically everything, even stuff like beer and cars and tickets to sporting events. Like, we are still the buyers of all that shit. So we can control all of that, and like, we want to see the innovations. Like, women, we created the organic food industry. We've created a lot of stuff. So I want to demystify, tell people, like, the on-ramps are a lot different today than they were 9 years ago, and it's fantastic. So I'm happy to talk more about that.
Awesome. You see why we have these three powerhouse women. We're gonna learn a lot today. So in the interest of time, and again, you don't all three of you have to answer all the questions if you feel like enough has been said, because we have so many questions for you, and the audience will have some questions too. But I just love to put out there, and Tracy, we can start again with you. Who taught you about money investing and investing? Like, let's start at the beginning with that. And how did that lead to your current work?
I was a math major, right? So money's just numbers, and I like numbers. So at the time when I was younger, I didn't think about money. I used to spend my summers doing math problems, and that's what a black nerd I was, blurred, what we call ourselves. And so once I got into venture capital, because my parents, we're like low middle class Air Force brat. Like, you don't make a lot of money in the Air Force, unfortunately. And so not around entrepreneurs. I knew I didn't like to work for people. I'm probably the worst employee. So never hire me if I come to you. But when I started to, like Kristin said, I started to, when I was, I think like 20 years ago, after I left, kind of left the tech, working in the tech world as an engineer, and I got into venture capital, we were tossing $2 million checks to, two dudes and an idea, and they run with it, right? And I'm like, and we kept doing that. I was reading 300 business plans, and I would have the first meetings, and they were all dudes. I mean, at this point, there weren't any people of color, like 0 people of color, and maybe a couple of women. And I just didn't think that made sense when everyone told me you should invest in a growing market, and white dudes were shrinking, right? And I didn't understand that. So I just started to learn more about finance, went to business school, and started really understanding the power of money. And Joy Anderson, if any of you know her, my favorite thing to say to her that she says is, finance isn't about money, it's about power. And once we understand that, so when Kristin talks about 1.3% of the people who manage capital or assets are women and people of color, that's 98.7% are white men. And so all of it had to do with being like the unfairness of it. It wasn't about the money. And then like many women, I thought money was dirty. Like I didn't want to admit I wanted to make a lot of money, or I spent a lot of money, or a lot of women don't want to admit they have a lot of money. I fit into what society did, that number it played on us. So it didn't occur to me till I started doing the research to see the products that were being created, where they treated us like victims, and some guys would decide what was made for us to use. But they never thought of us as the innovators of the products that were being invested in. I mean, we're the ones who are harmed the most from climate change, from everything, but weren't giving us the power. So then I started thinking, I need to understand numbers about money. I need to understand Wall Street. That's why I went to Columbia. Know thy enemy. I went to Berkeley too, but I was already, touchy-feely, entrepreneurial, but I wanted to know Wall Street. And that's where I really discovered what was really happening. And that changed everything for me, that, we need to invest in women who control the money. And that's when trickle-down economics actually works. You invest in fund managers or asset managers like Kristin, then it trickles down to entrepreneurs of color or women, who then hire people who are people of color or women. And then it goes into communities that are for women and people of color. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I answered what I wanted to answer. So.
You did. It's perfect. Barbara, do you want to riff?
I'm old enough that like when I was like 12 years old, I delivered newspapers, and I basically have had a job ever since. And I think I got, really hooked on the concept of like my money. I'm earning my money. I save my money, and I get to do what I want with that money, because, I saved my money from when I was 12. And then when I get to high school, I could afford to go on the high school trip to London, and it was fucking awesome. Whereas my brother, who also had a paper route, he spent his money on dumbass things, and so he had no trip to Europe. He did nothing. So that's where I was like, I got really into it, and then I'm an economist, and so super into data and money and big picture thinking. But at the end of the day, the college doesn't really teach you about like, how do you buy your first home or things like that. So I just read everything. I read the book on this, and I read Your Money or Your Life a gajillion years ago. And so it just like made me think about that. And so one of the things I realized, I think it's a little harder now for folks to learn about money, or younger people in particular, because there's so much noise everywhere. And anyway, there's information is so much more accessible, but then how do you personally curate it? So I know, like, for example, my assistant's buying a house. And I was like, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do that? Da, 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 da. And how many times, even my, what I would think is very educated professional people who work for me, and I'm like, dude, max out that 401k. What is wrong with you? You know, like, this is the best money you're ever going to make. Like, don't pay the tax man. You know, so I realized that, you know, we need to be much more comfortable, like always just talking about money. So, because people need to hear that, because I had terrible messages about money. My parents were terrible with money. And so I want to counter that, like with the, you know, the folks in my life, you know, whether it's my own children and their friends, you know, we just have frank conversations, like they're like, what's a stock? Like, you know, they don't know that kind of stuff.
Yeah, by having us not ask questions and not talk about money and have money be a taboo, that is how it keeps us playing small. Because you know, guys have those conversations all the time, and that's part of the intention of all this and these conversations is just talk about money. Talk about money with all of our women friends and your male allies, and ask those questions. That's, you know, the guys do this, and so I just want to just ask questions. Kristin Holt, what's your money story?
So many money stories. Although, so I grew up without very much money, and my mom's actually on the call here, which I'm still trying to figure that out. Like, Mom, are you a member of the Battery? Like, how did you get in on this Zoom? You could participate because you're definitely part of my money story. And so I really watched my parents and understood some of the consequences that could happen when you had to make tough decisions around money. And so whether it was braces for both my brother and I needed braces on our legs or something when we had a weird thing we were born with. And then also my dad's commuting and needed tires for the car to keep the car safe. And so when your parents are discussing the either ors, you know, that, you know, you're in the United States where you don't have healthcare, you know, or public transportation or, you know, those things, but it definitely, those types of conversations were growing up. And then at the same time, both of my parents were very, and continue to be very entrepreneurial. And so were, you know, my dad was a Fuller brushman and he was a math teacher and he was, you know, these other things. And my mom read English papers in the evenings and did stitchery things. And at any rate, I grew up with that you can make it work, that there's, you know, you puzzle it together, work really hard. And then Stella wants to participate in the call. I'm so sorry. It's, you can sit and listen and she's fine listening. But as soon as I start talking, she wants like, why aren't you talking to me? So my apologies there, COVID times. So at any rate, my dad started a trading firm in our garage, as one does in California. And so from the age of 14, I was talking puts and calls and pork bellies and algorithms and really understanding that you could harness the financial industry for financial gains. And it wasn't until later after we sold that firm and I had gone on to become a classroom teacher because this money stuff just didn't resonate with me. It just, I really wanted to make a difference. And even though I would say the mantra at the dinner table and the backseat of the station wagon was buy low and sell high as frequently or as often as you can, and that's what high speed trading is, I didn't see how that was really making a difference. And so I was a classroom teacher. And then when we sold that company, that's when I started to become an investor. And that's when I put that hat on. And that's when I realized, and a little bit like Barbara, you know, there were all sorts of people telling you, you couldn't do it this way or you couldn't do it that way. And I was just doing it, you know, and putting money into basically trying to make sure that it was out of the bad and into the good. And when you just say that, you definitely get a lot of solar dudes that are knocking on the door and, you know, and they get the meetings. And I, with no offense to anyone on this call, I call them the cute Stanford boys because they're inevitably cute. They met each other at business school at Stanford, and they've got some solar thing where they're going to do this and they're going to do that. And then, you know, and these people and that, you know, and they get the investment dollars and it's not even clear what they're doing. And so I actually was caught in that in the beginning. And then I wanted to invest in my own community. And so I started to invest in women in Oakland, and there just weren't enough people following that. And so that's when I started to kind of look at the numbers, and there weren't other people that looked like me as investors. And that was also part of the problem. So that was part of my intro, was we have to get more women at the table investing. And so loving that everybody on this call wants to step up and be part of that.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Kristin. So our next question, and I will pose this one to you, Barbara. What are you looking for when you're looking to invest in women-led companies or founders?
Yeah, this is like the softball thing that I'm like gonna. So, when I started investing 9 years ago, I like in this specific thing, into startups. I said I knew from the get-go I was going to invest in women-led companies, and I was going to invest in stuff that interested me. I first thought I was going to invest in education products. I was very interested in women's health. And so I just, you just start saying that and you socialize it, and then, you meet investors and so forth. And, over the course of a couple of years, I had joined Astia Angels, which has a cohort in particular out of San Francisco of folks like Karen Drexler, who's a really well-known healthcare investor and entrepreneur herself. And, I started to I wanted to invest in women's health, but that's not my background. I'm a finance person. I'm an intellectual property person. And so, but I really was interested in. And so, of course, I meet these other investors for whom, like, this is their space. They do know this stuff. And I met a company called, now it's called Alidia. And it was a company started by a 21-year-old woman out of Cal Poly. She started it about a decade ago. And she created a completely innovative way to stop postpartum hemorrhaging. And so, talking about, like, so for me, this hit a bunch of buttons. First of all, it was a product that had global impact, because it wasn't some fancy treatment that only the wealthy women in whatever markets were going to be able to use. This was a market that was designed and developed to be deployed worldwide. They installed a CEO, a woman CEO, Anne Morrissey, who is very experienced in commercializing, bringing companies like this to market. So again, that's ticking a box, like, oh, okay, this is a great product. And I personally had a very traumatic postpartum hemorrhaging episode. And if I could literally, it's that thing sometimes you say, if, like, I could only stop one person from ever having that thing, trust me, it's definitely in the top 3 things, most traumatic things that have ever happened to me and my family. And so, big impact product, endorsed by my, fellow investors who knew the market. CEO experienced CEO. The leader of the deal was an institutional investor who was super committed to bringing this product forward. And it was interesting. We had this conversation. So this conversation was probably like either late 2017 or early 2018. And I'm like, I got to write this check. This thing needs to be in the world. And as a woman, I know that male investors don't really want to go into a Monday morning meeting and talk about, like, gross, disgusting lady parts and all the bad things that happen to them. And so I knew that this was going to have to be an investment that women were going to put their capital in. And, I was just really excited about it. And we were talking, and I said, listen, I'm investing for returns, but I also really want this thing to get out there. And interesting, the lead investor was a guy. But anyways, and he was saying, yeah, same thing. We really think that this has great potential. We want it to go global. And he's like, if we make 2 or 3 times our money back, we'll be fine, because, this is a really important product. And so, I invested. I reinvested again last year. The product has been a success. It's been implemented, and the key thing is like with postpartum. For those of you, I don't know, if you ever see like those old movies set in like the 1800s where the woman dies in childbirth, that's why she dies. She bleeds to death. This is a product that stops a woman who's hemorrhaging in like 30 seconds. They actually had some interesting situations where in their FDA trials, and this, I'm sorry for this little aside, but it just goes to show how important it is. Only certain women were going to be qualified because they had a very tightly controlled FDA trial. But the doctors had this moral dilemma. They kept saying, no, but we have this woman hemorrhaging, like we want to use this right now. And so we kept having to come down like a hammer on them. With the doctor saying, don't fuck up our FDA trial, because in this, like, we're not gonna be able to get this damn product out. So stop using it, even though we know that it's important. But anyways, on Tuesday, it was announced publicly that Merck is creating its own spin-off focused on women's health, and they purchased the Lydia for $240 million. And I will be on this one deal a shit ton of money. And I'm happy to say that. Like, I think I invested in, it's interesting because there's 2 other women's health funds I'm part of, and they both invested. So this goes to my thing, like, you know, I invest in women because women win. You know, I want to win. So I'm super competitive, and I'm so excited this product's out in the market. One of the women's funds that I'm in, they estimate that we're going to make about 7 times our money. So that's some pretty awesome, that's an awesome return for an awesome product that will have a huge impact. So if that doesn't make you psyched and say like, wait, how can I do this? But you know, it's a layered process. Like, I partnered with, you know, knowledgeable, experienced investors in women's health. I had done enough investing already that I was like checking the boxes of like, oh, this investor knows their thing. You know, this is a big enough market opportunity. The CEO is good. And then it all came together on Tuesday.
Wow. That is
So if we were in person, I'd be buying all your fucking champagne. That's for sure.
Yeah, you would.
That's what I wish we were drinking right now. That's awesome, Barbara. Thank you. We need to share more of those success stories.
And you're asking, and Letty, I know you're asking about race, because I'm very concerned about the horrible outcomes that we have in our country. I'm a supporter of the Momnibus Act, which has been proposed by Congresswoman Lauren Underwood and Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. And it actually had previously been sponsored by Kamala Harris, because yes, this product is effective. It has even been used in other countries that have different racial makeups than ours. But yes, it's effective across that. I'd like to see it as a tool that is at the side of every OB when they deliver a baby, because you just don't have to wait. You can stop any kind of hemorrhaging immediately.
That is on so many levels, Barbara. Thank you for sharing that. More wins when you invest in women. Tracy Gray, tell us, so you're raising $100 million.
Yes. Yes, I didn't really say what my fund does, because I'm always like trying to change the system, and then I'm forgetting that you're raising a fund. So our fund, we invest in manufacturing, the non-sexy manufacturing, which is the foundation of our economy, to help them increase international sales. And the reason we do this is we are impact investors, but I don't like to call us impact investors, because the impact space has been very white since the beginning, and it's very siloed. So you invest in gender, but you forget about race. You invest in climate, but you forget about gender. And I saw that women, especially women of color, were being impacted by all the stuff, all the bad in the world more than anyone else. And we were, like I said before, we would be the solution. And so I invested in this strategy because we call ourselves holistic investors, because this strategy causes multiple impacts. Companies that export are first, they are more resilient and they're more successful, 37% higher revenues. And then they create jobs faster. And those jobs, when the companies are coupled with manufacturing and exports, the jobs pay 56% higher wages, on average 94,000 a year, while they're fighting over $15 an hour minimum wage. Manufacturing actually lets you buy a house, right? And they're more likely to have health care. Then the majority of people who export are people of color. So you hit all these, you hit racial, and then gender. People don't realize that there's an organization called Women in Manufacturing with 6,700 members, and 300 of them are presidents and founders of companies in manufacturing. And the problem in manufacturing right now, there's a 2.4 million job a shortfall in skilled labor for it, because manufacturing is going tech-based and tech-enabled. And so those line, blue collar workers on the line, you need to have a minimum of 8th grade analytical skills. So I saw this strategy as what I call the back door. And I use back door like the racists in the South used to say the Black people have to go through the back door. This was a back door into the tech industry for women and people of color. Because frankly, even when we invest in entrepreneurs that are women and people of color, most of these companies are software, all those kind of sexy software, but whatever tech that people want to get into. But that's an elite group of people they can hire. So they're not hiring the middle class worker. And so the jobs being created are not being created in communities, low income communities, or for women and people of color. So I found this strategy for that reason. I wanted to de-risk it. So because these companies are more successful, I wanted to have high returns and high impact without concessions or trade-offs. So we have it's a blue ocean strategy, right? No one else is looking at these companies and helping them to export, because frankly, if you saw from the last administration, most people don't understand trade. And people see it as very transactional and don't understand that only 1% of the companies in the United States, 1 to 3% export. Whereas you look at any other economies, what we used to call the BRICS, when the BRICS were fancy, and Germany, 42% of their economy is based on exports. So they made it through the last recession really well. And we were just selling to each other. And so that's why we were hit so hard. And then when the global pandemic happened and our supply chain was a problem, it was because our manufacturers didn't have the capital to be able to pivot and create the PPE that we desperately needed. If they had our capital, they could have done that. So we're investing in a very unsexy, but the heart of our communities is manufacturing. Manufacturing is in low and moderate income communities because the land is cheaper. And that's where the jobs are going to be created. So along with doing that, I love the companies that we look at. Anything from a trolley system, it's a hydrogen powered train that does those last mile transportation. So if you go to, the Qatar, the World Cup is going to be using these trains to get around and that's a Latinx man. And then a woman who started a carbon black dye. The second most polluting industry is textiles. And it's because of the dye that they just waste everywhere. And it's petroleum based. And black, all of us right now, I guarantee, have something either on us, or we're sitting on something, or we're using something that has carbon black in it. And it's all petroleum based. She came up with a product that's made from wood waste. And she's not cutting down native, it's not new wood, it's waste, like literal waste that they were going to throw away. And it's the first one that's zero carcinogens, 100% circular too. So this is like what Barbara's saying, like who comes up with these technologies? They come up with them because they're trying to solve problems that they have that these cute Stanford boys do not, or what I call the tech bros do not have. I don't remember your question anytime you ask me. I just start talking. And like, did I answer your question?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, Tracy, you always answer my question.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Building on that, Kristin Hall, let's talk about myth busting, particularly for those that say investing with a gender lens or racial justice is giving up returns. Since it's been proven that ROI is higher, 15% more likely to generate above average profitability for companies with more diverse executive teams, what would you say it's going to take, and what is it going on to shift the investors towards more gender lens investing?
It's a great question, and we're all kind of grappling with this when the research is there. Diverse teams are better for all the different reasons. I think there's research that says diverse teams make better decisions 87% of the time. The minute you put a woman on a board of directors, meetings start on time. We're not often welcome on these meetings because we ask thoughtful questions. And women are not likely to vote on something that we don't understand. And so when this year's numbers don't match last year's numbers, we ask a thoughtful question. That keeps the board meeting running past cocktail hour. We are not welcome unless there are more of us on these meetings asking thoughtful questions. Now, the more of us on the meetings, the better things are run. And so there's actually research on female CFOs. And I can't remember exactly what the statistics are there, but basically your chances of fraud and number manipulating are much lower with a female CFO. Don't we all want that in our companies? So there's all sorts of reasons that you would think that this might just be a better thing. And yet it's kind of like the Democratic Party. Like we love our facts, we love truth, we love these things, but that's not going to do it because that is not moving the numbers, And I invest with a woman, Keisha Cash, who is investing in undiscovered entrepreneurs that are really working on urban poverty issues. And they're so close to the problem that they have a much better assessment of how to deal with it. And it's going to be amazing. And we're going to do so much good. And just like Barbara said, we're going to make a lot of money doing all this good. It's like, I feel like it's this secret, best kept secret. Why would it be so hard for her to raise money when she has this amazing thesis of how to get this done? And she's a powerhouse. So with a track record. So I guess, at the NIA, we have these remarkable returns. And we're investing at the intersection of environmental sustainability and social justice. We're advocating with our companies. And for us, we see that as de-risking. We want to make sure that there's not brand risk when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion. Of course, it's the right thing to do. And it's definitely our agenda to get more women and people of color into positive and inclusive company cultures. And yet there's all this ROI, return on investment, to be seen when that happens as well. So I honestly would like to see, and I don't know that this will happen, but I'd like to give my deck and my investment in materials to a couple of Tracy's tech bros to march around. And I think if they just left out the activism and the racial justice part, they probably, just based on our fundamentals and our numbers, could raise a ton of money. It's really an interesting issue. And I think, if we're going to figure out our economy, we're going to have to figure out how to get money to the women and the people of color. And because our 401k depends on it, for us to actually make money, just as Barbara pointed out. So that's our strategy. We at NIA are launching a mutual fund, and fingers crossed and SEC willing this summer, June, it might even be June. We'll have a ticker symbol probably by May. And we want to do that because we know that the mutual fund can be in 401k product, and then everyday individual investors for their own selves in their retirement can grow their wealth. And they can be investing into the companies that we really need to see get the dollars. That's our theory, is to get more women and people of color investing. in making those decisions.
That's why we are all here. And on that note, just a final quick, each one of you, and I know we also have some questions and we're bumping up against time, but of course, this is what happens when you have these incredible three of you that I could listen to you for hours more, and I will. Please, let's go around quickly. Start with Barbara. Just like to hear kind of final word, advice for the folks that are. I'm all about, again. We don't want to just blah blah blah. We want to take action. So how can the folks on this call, what is your key takeaway piece of advice to get started, to move? All the people on this call have influence in terms of personally and professionally, and obviously have an interest in moving more money towards women and women of color. What is your advice, your best piece of advice for the folks on this call?
Get in the game. Just get in the game. And, as I mentioned before, the on-ramps are a lot different now. There's been some changes in legislation, and you have organizations like Portfolio, which has, what I call like retail investing, like for, I think as low as $10,000, you can get into a fund, and you're busy, you got a day job, you got all this other stuff going on. You can be as active or as passive as you want to be. And there are lots of other sort of small funds that are opening. Put in the minimum or whatever you're comfortable with, and then just watch, because while you got your day job going on, because we've also been socialized that, oh, this kind of investing in startups, that's for like when you're old and retired. We call them the Romeos, the retired old men eating out. No, like, you're what? You're fabulous in 40 and you've got a little bit of cash, and, maybe you have a big fat 401k if you've had a nice corporate job. You could do a self-directed IRA and pull a little bit of that out and plop it into a nice fund and get in the game. And then, it'll all start to snowball. And the more you learn, the more you know, and then you can start to say like, oh, I really want to do this, now next thing you know, you've been doing it for 5 years.
Love it. Tracy.
I'm not going to remember the question. So what advice?
Final word of advice. Knowing that all these women want to move, that are on this call, want to take some action towards moving their money towards, more women of color. What's some just practical advice?
So like Barbara said, just do it. Women tend to overthink everything. We have to cross our T's and dot our I's. And I'm one of those people that do that, which is why I invest in technology, so I could just dig deeper and deeper. But just do it. And also there's an easy way to dip into it. If you're not comfortable with being uncomfortable, if you have a DAF, that DAF can be customized into a fund. And so it's still philanthropy, but it's philanthropy with returns. And if your DAF is set up in a way that the returns come back to your DAF, you're just growing your philanthropy through investing, right? And so that's a way that I've been telling some women, because I get this, but it's not liquid if I come into your fund. It's like, well, no, but you can have a lot of impact. So ask you if you have a financial advisor, ask them about your DAF, if you have a DAF, and see if you can.
I want to ask you a follow-up question to that. So who do you use to manage your DAF that will do that for you? I know there's Impact Assets.
Impact Assets will do it. There's someone, CapShift does it for foundations. And so whatever, if a client has to come to them, they don't go out and look like Impact Assets. Mm-hmm. And then some foundations, like I think Tides has DAFs that do that. A small one here in LA, Liberty Hill Foundation has it, but you have to like really get them to move. It's hard. But they're all over the place. And it's to me, it's just a beautiful way to kind of straddle that line of investing and then still doing philanthropy.
Thank you. Kristin Hull.
Okay, and can you remind me the question? I think it's what are takeaways or something?
Yeah, just as Tracy and Barbara,
a bias to action,
some concrete action they can take where they feel like, again, we're not just talking about this, but they can actually move some of their money towards women
Okay, well, I'm going to echo what everyone says. So get in the game. What could you do? One thing is look at where you're banking, because Rainforest Action Network actually puts out a really fabulous report card, mainly on climate. They don't necessarily address the inequities. Sometimes that comes up. At any rate, some banks are better than others. Your local bank, by definition, is investing money locally. I put in the chat, both Barbara and I are investors at C-Note, and we love that they use CDFIs and can direct money specifically.
So am I, thanks to your advice.
Okay, great. Okay, so women entrepreneurs created the product, and they're investing money in local banks across the United States, and you can specify if you want that going to women of color in specific funds. So, love them. And then I would say the world really does change one conversation at a time. And some of these conversations are easier than others. Raising our voices and just letting people know, hey, I want to invest into a portfolio where there are women in leadership. Most investment advisors have never heard of that as a concept. So you're bringing it to their attention that that's even a possibility. Or on the flip side, they actually have no idea that the companies they invest in don't have women in leadership, because no one's really put that on their radar. So bringing that gender lens just into your conversations will get your advisor thinking. And hopefully the advisor is really excited to dive into this with you. I actually wrote an article on how and when it's time to break up with your financial advisor. And I haven't put it out yet because at NIA, we actually have to work with financial advisors. That's kind of the key to our success, is to have advisors using this product out in the world. So we don't want to alienate anyone. And yet, if your advisor isn't super responsive, transparent, as Barbara said, using language that you understand, then it's not the right advisor. Even if it's your uncle or your, husband's friend, or, whoever it is.
Especially.
What is it?
I'll say especially if it's your uncle or your husband's friend.
Well, that's just, these are trusted advisors that are often, have come to weddings, family things. And so making those boundaries, about you're paying them fees, and you should really be clear about what the fees are and where they're going, right? And that's often not part of the conversation. So at any rate, saying that you want women and people of color in leadership, you want products and services that are designed for women and people of color, at least it'll get them thinking. And if they're not giving you answers right away, it's time to start shopping. I put a couple things in the chat. Investibule.co is a crowdfunding space where, and actually I mentioned that because women and people of color do much better crowdfunding their businesses, whereas we talked about these traditional routes where we've often been locked out. We have networks that care about this. And so when they put it out online, people do better. So both of those have things where you can get in for $500, $1,000 for smaller things. Those are not coming out of your retirement fund. I would say these are more of a kind of a experiment, try out. There's a restaurant in my neighborhood, I want to invest in them. There's a new idea. A lot of these are early stage. And so I just want to put kind of my investment advisor, there is risk to investing, and then I guess I would flip that and say, there's more risk to not investing. And I actually asked myself this question: what is the risk of not making this investment? What if these women don't get the money they need to start this venture? What will the world look like or not look like? So this whole idea of risk, we definitely need to have buckets about what we're going to pay our rent with. But if it's an extra bucket that's not going directly to food, rent, or your grandchildren, then I think it's an investable bucket where you can invest into the economy that you want. And that's actually what happens, right? We invest into the economy we have, we can invest into the economy we want. And we can make change with every dollar. And start with your bank. Start anywhere, actually. You can start anywhere. You can start with your public equities with me. You can write a check to Tracy. There's lots of options. And Barbara will have so many ideas. Actually, she and I have co-invested. We need to catch up on what are the things we've co-invested on, because if How Women Lead was open, I would recommend there, although that fund closed so fast, and I cannot wait until maybe Heather will tell us when the next one is coming. And you're gonna have to get in fast because they're amazing at fundraising, that group.
So Kristin, Barbara, Tracy, we're at time. Of course, this went too fast. I just want to say, all three of you, I have so much gratitude for all of you, so much respect for your work. It was actually these three, I look at them all as mentors for me that got me to, as Barbara said, just to get in the game. I had just been thinking about it, but actually was talking to these three that was just like, just take action. And that's what I encourage everybody on this call. It actually feels so good. I have to tell you, like, it feels good to invest in with your values. Like before it was like, I don't know where my retirement funds are invested in. And now I'm like, I love that I have like gender lens, like concrete investments. I love that, you know, the savings is in C note and actually like going for good and aligned with my investments. It really makes, I love investing with Nia and what they're all about. It feels good. So I just really want to encourage everybody to commit. 2021 is our year. We do not read, no more statistics about like, you know, more crumbs being thrown to women. Let's start with us, ourselves, this year. If everybody on this call makes a commitment in the year 2021 to just take a piece of your portfolio or your influence, whatever it is, and move more of that money towards women, then we are actually, I believe, building the momentum of the change and the world that we want to see. Thank you again, Kristin, Barbara, Tracy, all of you. We'll share out all your links with everybody after this call, and let's do this. It's time already. It's time.